The wind over Rome once carried the whispers of destiny. They said a man was coming, not born of mercy, but of fire. A man who would walk through the ashes of the Republic and crown himself in its dust. His name was Julius Caesar. In a world ruled by the Senate's greed and generals drunk on their own victories, he rose, not as a soldier, not as a politician, but as something greater, a force of history itself. The earth trembled beneath his legions, and with every conquest, the old world faded a little more. But every empire, every giant, no matter how powerful, eventually faces the silence of its own echo. This is the story of that silence, the rise, the glory, and the fall of a man who changed the world forever. Before there was an emperor, there was a boy, thin, sharp-eyed, and restless. Rome was not yet an empire, but a wounded animal, torn between the greed of its senators and the ambition of its generals. It was a republic that had forgotten what it stood for. The people were starving, the streets bled with riots, and power had become a game for the ruthless. In that chaos, a young Julius Caesar learned the one truth that would define his life: power is never given. He was born into nobility, but not into wealth. His family had the name, not the influence. When Rome turned against his uncle Marius, Caesar's bloodline became a curse. Soldiers hunted him. He fled, hid, begged for mercy, but fate had no intention of ending his story in the shadows. When the storm passed, he returned, scarred, hardened, and unhungrier than ever. He walked the halls of Rome not as a survivor, but as a predator who had learned to smile. He studied the people, the Senate, the games of deceit. He realized Rome didn't need another man to follow the rules. It needed a man to rewrite them. And he did. He won the hearts of the poor with bread and bravery. He dazzled the masses with words that could move mountains and promises that could heal wounds. While others fought for gold, he fought for glory, for something that would outlive marble and memory alike. Then came Gaul, the land of forests and blood. For 10 long years, Caesar marched through mud and mountains, facing tribes who fought like wolves. Rome had sent him to conquer. And what he conquered instead was destiny. He wrote letters home, not reports but legends, words dipped in triumph. O veni vidi vici, he would one day say, I came, I saw, I conquered. But behind those words was something far greater than victory. He had forged an army that loved him more than they loved Rome, and they loved Rome, and the Senate knew it. They saw a general turning into a god, a man whose name echoed louder than their decrees. When Caesar returned from Gaul, the streets of Rome trembled. The people cheered, the Senate feared. Because in that moment, one truth became clear. The Republic was dying, in its place something vast and unstoppable was being born. But history has a cruel sense of irony. The same ambition that lifts a man to the heavens also sharpens the knife that will one day strike him down. The rise of Julius Caesar was not just the story of a man's ascent. It was the story of Rome's transformation. For when he rose, so too did the dawn of empire, and the world would never be the same again. There are moments in history when the world holds its breath, when one man's decision redraws the lines between past and future. For Julius Caesar, that moment came on a cold January night in 49 BC, before a narrow river called the Rubicon. It was not a mighty stream, not a river that sang with grandeur or glory, just a shallow stretch of water in northern Italy. But beyond it lay Rome, and with it treason. The Senate had given its command. Disband your army, Caesar, and return as a citizen, or face the wrath of the Republic. Those words were not a warning. They were a threat, one forged in fear, for the senators knew that Caesar had outgrown their world. They saw in him not just ambition, but inevitability. That night, Caesar stood by the water's edge. Behind him, thousands of loyal soldiers, battle-worn, eyes fixed on the man they would follow to death itself. Ahead of him, a river that separated order from chaos, law from legend. The air was still. The stars seemed to dim, as if the heavens themselves leaned in to listen. And then, in a voice both calm and eternal, he spoke the words that would echo through the corridors of time. Aliae acta est, the DI is cast. In that single step across the Rubicon, Caesar did more than defy the Senate. He declared war on the old world. The Republic, already rotting from within, was now burning. Rome's legions split. Brother turned against brother. The city of marble and might trembled beneath the march of destiny. Pompey fled to the east. Senators scattered like leaves before a storm, and the people watched, torn between terror and awe, as their savior became their conqueror. No more compromises. No more pretending that Rome could remain a republic while men like Caesar walked its earth. He marched south, swift and silent, his banners fluttering like the wings of vengeance. Every town that opened its gates to him swore loyalty not to the Senate, but to Caesar himself. He was no longer a general. He was a movement. The Rubicon was not just a river. It was a grave. A grave for the republic, for its traditions, its illusions, its gods of balance and restraint. As Caesar's army entered Rome without resistance, the streets were eerily quiet. The Senate, once the beating heart of the republic, sat paralyzed, its power reduced to parchment and memory. And in that silence, a new sound began to rise, the sound of empire awakening. The crossing of the Rubicon was not the act of rebellion. It was the coronation of inevitability. For history does not remember those who follow the rules. It remembers those who rewrite them. And Julius Caesar, in one stride through the cold waters of the Rubicon, did not just cross a river. He crossed into immortality. Or has a way of changing the air around a man. It bends loyalty, it breeds fear, and it whispers, "You were meant for more." And as Julius Caesar marched through the marble veins of Rome, that whisper became thunder. The Republic had fallen silent. Pompey was dead. The Senate, trembling, bowed before the man it had once condemned. The streets were no longer ruled by debate or decree, but by the echo of marching boots. Caesar's boots. Rome, the eternal city, had a new master. He was crowned dictator for life, but Caesar never wore the crown of a king. He didn't need to. His name was the crown. His will, the law. His shadow stretched from the Tiber to the edges of the known world. But he was not content with power alone. He dreamed not of ruling Rome, but of transforming it. He rebuilt temples that had turned to dust, restored laws that had lost their meaning, and lifted the common man from despair. He filled the city with bread, beauty, and purpose. He granted citizenship to men once called outsiders, and his reforms breathed life into a republic that had long been dying in silence. To the poor, he was a savior. To the soldiers, a god. But to the Senate, he was a storm that refused to end. Rome had built itself on the idea that no man was greater than the law. Yet now, all laws bent around one man. He sat upon his marble throne, his eyes not on the city before him, but on the horizon beyond it. He dreamed of an empire. A Rome that stretched across continents, uniting the world beneath one flag, one language, one destiny. And for a moment it seemed possible. The people adored it, the soldiers worshipped it, even the stars above seemed to burn in his favor. But in the corridors of the Senate, where ambition is never far from envy, fear began to grow. The men who once called him friend began to see him as something else, a threat to the old gods, a dagger aimed at the heart of liberty. But Caesar, he never saw it coming. He believed his greatness had conquered everything, even jealousy. He mistook fear for loyalty, envy for admiration. The dream of empire had blinded him. He did not see the knives being sharpened in the shadows. Yet even in that blindness, there was beauty. For his dream of a world united under order and ambition would not die with him. It would echo through time, shaping kings, conquerors, and nations yet unborn. Julius Caesar may have built his empire upon power, but his true legacy was built upon vision. The vision that the world could be remade by the will of a single man. There are moments when time itself seems to hold its breath, when the air grows heavy with the scent of fate. For Julius Caesar, that moment came on the Ides of March, 44 BC, the day the lion walked willingly into the den. The morning sun broke over Rome like any other, warm, golden, indifferent. The city stirred, unaware that history was sharpening its knives. Caesar woke in his palace, his wife Calpurnia trembling from a dream, a vision of blood, betrayal, of him lying slain beneath the statue of Pompey. She begged him not to go. But Caesar smiled, as only a man who believes himself untouchable can. The cowards die many times before their deaths, he said. The valiant never tasted death but once. With that, he stepped into eternity. The Senate house waited, grand, quiet each. Inside, men who once dined with him, fought beside him, toasted his victories, now waited with daggers beneath their robes. He entered as a god among mortals. The murmurs fell silent. The marble floor echoed his steps, slow, confident, final, and then the storm began. A senator approached him, pleading for mercy for a friend. Caesar waved him off. Another joined in, then another. Suddenly, hands grasped his toga. He turned, confusion flashing in his eyes, and saw steel. A blade flashed in the dim light, then another. then another. He staggered back, the air filling with the sound of fabric tearing, of steel meeting flesh, of gasps and fury. Blood spattered across the white marble. The Republic had struck back 23 times, and among the faces twisted with fear and rage, he saw one that froze his soul. Brutus. Not just an ally, not just a friend, but a man he had loved as a son. Et tu, Brute. And you too, my son. In that moment, the conqueror of Gaul, the breaker of nations, the man who had defied destiny itself, fell silent. No army at his back, no crowd to cheer. Only the echo of betrayal beneath the statue of Pompey, the same Pompey whose defeat had sealed Caesar's rise. How poetic, how cruel. The Senate, drenched in their own righteousness, believed they had restored freedom, that by killing the tyrant they had revived the Republic. But Rome did not cheer. The streets did not sing. The people wept, because in killing Caesar they had not slain a tyrant. They had slain a symbol, and symbols do not die easily. His blood became the ink that wrote the next chapter of Rome's destiny. His death lit a fire that would consume the Republic entirely. The daggers that ended his life did not save Rome. They ended it. And in that silence after his fall, another shadow began to rise. One that would wear his name, one that would finish what he began. Death is supposed to be the end of a man's story, but some men do not end, they echo. They echo. They rise again. Not in flesh, but in the tremor of history's voice. Julius Caesar was gone. His body lay still beneath the marble he once ruled. The conspirators had fled through alleys that now smelled of iron and fear. They believed Rome had been freed, that liberty had triumphed over tyranny. But Rome did not see it that way. When his body was carried through the forum, the people gathered, thousands upon thousands. Some wept, others raged. They remembered the man who had fed them, who had given them hope, who had promised them a Rome of glory, not greed. And as Mark Antony stood over Caesar's corpse, his voice thundered through the square. This was the most noble Roman of them all, the crowd. The crowd turned. The anger burned, and in that fire the Republic, the very thing the senators thought they had saved, turned to ashes. Civil war erupted. Blades flashed again, but this time not in the Senate, on the battlefield. Blood filled the veins of the empire to be, and out of that blood rose a new name, Augustus, Caesar's adopted son, the heir to his vision, the boy who would become the first emperor of Rome. The Republic was gone. The empire was born. The empire was born. And so the man they killed to preserve freedom became the very reason freedom was lost forever. Yet through that loss, something vast and eternal was born. An idea, a myth, a name that would outlive kingdoms, centuries, even time itself. For centuries, rulers would chase his shadow. Kings would call themselves Caesar. Emperors in distant lands, from Byzantium to Russia, would carry his name like a crown of divine right, Kaiser, Tsar. The modern world still feels the ripples of his ambition in our politics, our power, our hunger to shape destiny by our hand. Because Julius Caesar did not just build an empire of stone, he built an empire of the mind. A belief that one man's will could bend the arc of history itself. And though the man fell to daggers, his dream lived on, carved into the bones of nations, whispered through the corridors of time. He became more than mortal. He became a warning and a lesson that greatness comes with a cost, that ambition, unchecked, can raise worlds and destroy them just as swiftly. That power, once tasted, is never forgotten by those who follow. The Republic died the day Caesar fell, but in that death, Rome became eternal. And across 2,000 years, his name still walks beside us, through every leader who dares to dream beyond their time. Every empire that rises and falls beneath the weight of its own glory. Julius Caesar, the man who defied the world and in falling, changed it.